This is some of the audio from Hugh's video on the site, and it's kind of a juxtaposition of part of the Lower East Side.
It's amazing to see this transformation of the city from the point of view of scale. Here is this one block with a single building. Look over here and see how many different buildings were put together in the same dimension. And that was the scale of 19th century New York. Here's the scale of 21st century New York, and heaven knows what's going to follow.
All right, so what were you looking at there, Hugh?
It's a major development down on Canal Street. No, not Canal Street, Houston Street, in which an entire block has been dedicated to fairly mundane stuff. Mundane because it just repeats and repeats and repeats without any specific point of view. And it's right next door to the Lower East Side jumble from the 19th century, in which each plot had a different owner and a different attitude about what architecture was.
So you're looking at stone and brick on the one side, and skinny buildings, and glass and steel.
Glass and steel, but of course...
And not only much taller buildings, but like whole block buildings.
Whole block buildings, and every now and then there's a gesture made to the past by pasting on a piece of masonry, but it's fairly half-hearted, and no one's fooling anybody that somehow it fits into the context.
Well, of course, it becomes, unfortunately, a new context.
I'll say.
So it sort of the context we're trying to fit into is harder and harder to find. Hugh, I think you make a really wonderful point, because in a lot of ways, part of the problem today is as sites get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
It's not just that buildings get taller.
No.
That's almost the least of it. It's that building plots get bigger and bigger, and that variation that we're used to on the streetscape that makes it so wonderful to walk down a great old block in New York is gone.
And the video makes it so clear, because you see the skinny buildings and you see the block-long buildings. It's a really well-done video, Hugh. We're glad we gave you one of our little flip cameras here. 212-433-WNYC. We'll get to some of your calls in a minute about what buildings, what spaces have transformed New York in the last 10 years. But I want to play another clip from, actually this is from the other Hugh Hardy video, and this is a view of what he calls the skinny buildings around Union Square.
This is an astonishing assortment of buildings. These little pieces of cake piled up against one another, each a different style, each the result of a different point of an inflated market that could make such skinny buildings valuable. All of these, except one, maintain their original facade, and it's quite astonishing assortment of opinions about how to make a building.
And I think even without seeing the video, Hugh, just about all New Yorkers can envision those old skinny office buildings, not to mention residential apartment buildings that used to populate the city almost solely. So why, if Paul, you find the new glass, steel, and big block buildings so much more ugly, are they coming to predominate new construction? Is it money and scale, or is it that aesthetics have changed and you guys are out of touch, or what is it?
I think it's a little bit of everything, actually. There's no question, by the way, that the predominant change in the cityscape in this whole boom is not any single building project, but the collective impact of all this glass. You know, glass was really very beautiful when it was in contrast to stone. I mean, when they built the Seagram building and you had this glass gem with old stone buildings around it, it was absolutely wonderful. It really was a jewel. Now, however, you can't build a whole city out of glass. Something's wrong. Something feels so brittle all the time to it. And that's where we seem to be going now.
Although I kind of like the Chicago skyline.
I do too.
Had the good fortune to take the Chicago River architecture tour last year, and I was really struck by, as somebody who doesn't really love the glass look, how much I like the overall effect in downtown Chicago, partly because they managed to have a different tint on a lot of the buildings. So some of them look blue, some of them look red, some of them look clear, and it was much more aesthetically pleasing, at least to my eye.
They've done better stuff than we have.
True.
I think, with that. Absolutely. Their standards have actually generally been higher. I hate to say it as a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, but in fact, architectural standards on the average are higher in Chicago.
And Hugh, what is it when you're designing and you are trying to please the client? Does everybody say, "Oh, build me a glass and steel building now," or why does it get done this way so frequently?
Well, again, it's the marketplace. There are interesting discussions in housing, for instance, as to whether people want floor-to-ceiling glass or whether they want windows so they can hang up Grandma's portrait. What do you do with
mean
Grandma's?
Walls?
Yeah, you need small windows in walls. Yes.
I see.
What do you do with Grandma when it's floor-to-ceiling glass? So in housing, although, yes, lots of stuff has been built because it gets attention that's all glass, there's a strong question as to whether that's the future. In office buildings, it's obvious that you sell the view, and you can even make buildings with lots of corner offices by wiggling around, and you pay the extra expense for bay windows because you can crank up the rent of these individual offices. And so there are different kinds of markets. But what Paul was saying before about street life here, the streets are the glory of the city. It is the experience you treasure. And I think that there's a different experience at street level than there is when you view these things, these buildings, from a distance. And by and large, they're critically received only as objects in the distant view, whereas in fact, you're experiencing them walking down the street. And there's a tremendous difference between buildings that acknowledge the grid and play with it and those that do everything possible to violate it.